After cutting some nice sized 1-inch steaks from an eye of round roast, I am now on a quest to tenderize, cook, season, and sear the perfect steak. I started with traditional brining using coarse salt, covered and placed in the refrigerator for 1 hour. After rinsing off the salt, the next step is to utilize an enzyme found in pineapples called bromelain to break down the meat's collagen fibers. It's important to mention that I use canned pineapple slices and juice liquefied in a blender, which is thought to have about half of the tenderizing effect of fresh pineapple. I guessed at doing this for an hour, which turned out pretty good, but not quite as tender as I had hoped for. The one thing I got right was the sous vide temperature and 3-hour duration, finding the sweet spot that I prefer, 1 microstep above medium rare, but still a fair distance away from medium. This is now my 5th attempt at preparing a delicious tender steak from an eye of round cut, and while each attempt has shown improvement, I still haven't had the results I had hoped for. Attempt number 4 was an 8 out of 10, much improved, but still with more room for improvement. Going back to the drawing board yet again, the trial and error of my earlier attempts makes me confident that this 5th try is going to be a winner. Oh, I can tell just cutting it. Okay, so that is perfect. That is perfect. That's exactly what I'm after. That's at halfway point between medium rare and rare. You see the color of that? Let's give it a taste test. I've done it. This is the perfect steak. Let's get a close-up of that. You can see the perfect color, but you are also looking at the breakdown of the meat structure from the tenderizing effects, which has resulted in an almost melt-in-your-mouth tenderness. So let's review how I did it. I started out by purchasing an approximately 6-pound eye of round roast at $4.50 a pound. I then cut it into 1-inch thick steak while planning to use leftover portions for future stir fries. The entire point of using eye of round roast is because it is generally the cheapest beef available and tastes delicious, but is unfortunately also one of the toughest cuts of beef. Still, if tenderized properly and prepared correctly, the results can be tremendous, quite often rivaling far more expensive cuts. If you do research online on how to tenderize a steak, you will find variations of these 7 methods, which all work more or less to varying degrees. However, I've found through trial and error that I can tenderize a steak well enough by combining some of these methods, but I soon run into another problem. The costs add up. It's no longer a cheap steak, which obviously defeats the purpose. For example, in my part of the world, a fresh pineapple costs about $5, or about 50 cents more than a pound of the eye of round steak I was marinating. It wasn't until I tripped across an 8th tenderizing method that I felt this effort made sense. Yeah, I know, sparkling water, what? But it works. Not only that, there's no waste like with a pineapple or other methods, and I can do all 6 of the steaks I cut out of the roast with the same 99-cent 1-liter bottle. So this new revised list is how I ended up with the perfect, but still very cheap steak. Let's take a quick look. You can see the dimpling marks left by the tenderizing hammer. If the look of your finished steak is of concern to you, don't worry, these marks will completely disappear when the steak is cooked, so pound away. The next step was brining. In my earlier attempts, thinking that I did not want to overdo it, I mistakenly used too little salt. I corrected that, coating the steak liberally in coarse sea salt. It is important to completely rinse the salt off before proceeding to the next step. And as I mentioned, the final tenderizing step before sous vide slow cooking is marinating for an hour in no-name brand sparkling water. I used about half of a 1-liter bottle this time, but could have easily used less to save a few more pennies. At this point, I have about 90 cents invested in tenderizing ingredients. A far cry from the $5.50 if I had purchased and used a fresh pineapple in this final tenderizing step. Even canned pineapple would have more than tripled the cost if I used it here. From here, it is 3 hours in the sous vide machine. The manual that came with my machine suggests that medium rare is 135 degrees for 3 hours, while medium is 140 degrees for 3 hours. As I mentioned earlier, I have found that 138 degrees for the same 3 hours suits my preferences. We all have different preferences when it comes to steak. When the sous vide cooking is done, the steaks can be prepped for serving in a number of different ways, including a quick session on the barbecue grill or possibly an indoor electric grill. But today I'm just going to use a heavy skillet. After basting with olive oil or melted butter, the seasoning I use is simply salt, pepper, and garlic powder. With the burner on medium-high heat, I get a nice searing effect after about 30 seconds on each side. And this is the final product. A real nice steak dinner with a cost all-included $5 steak. Well, that's it for today. Thank you for watching. Please consider subscribing, and I hope to see you next time.
When the stars won't shine for you, your dreams turn black and blue. On those dark nights you'll be alright, and I'll be right there with you. Together we'll see it through.